Welcome to Equinox, where Rob and I are striking the balance between the light and the dark, and we are back this week. This is episode 12. My name is Joseph Darnell, and I'm joined by my good friend, Dr. Robert Carter. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Joe.
We needed to take last week as sort of a sabbatical to take care of some other projects and family matters, but we felt like we had earned it. We've been working this podcast so hard, burning the midnight oils for episodes 1 through 11. I don't know how we did it.
I don't either.
Our producers are so hard on us.
Joe, the slave driver.
Whenever I'm watching like a filmmaking, documentary about like a superhero movie and how it exhausts the directors and they're miserable after making their movie and they want to quit. It's like, yeah, I know, but you're also rich and
that's true,
everybody loves you.
Every time I've been involved in a movie project, I've done 3 now with CMI. In the middle of it, I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And then at the end, I'm so happy that we actually pushed through it and finished it.
Yeah. And they've been good films and they're so useful. The thing is that the pain is temporary and the reward is, I don't know, like it lasts a little while longer.
It lasts a long time. I'm still getting comments from the stuff we did 10 years ago. I don't mind that.
I have a lot of books and videos on the shelf. I don't get a lot of feedback about. So, what did you want to talk about this week? I had something important.
Yes.
We haven't really talked much about this on Equinox, so I thought that it would be able to give our listeners a fresh perspective, hearing from you what you think about the coronavirus. I don't want this whole episode to be about the coronavirus.
On my biblical genetics Facebook group, I said, no more coronavirus. Yeah. I put a moratorium. No one's allowed to talk about it now.
Well, the moratorium is now open.
As far as our state goes, okay. But it's very, very, very difficult to say. Mm-hmm. I don't have any good information. I don't have any information that I trust. Mm. All the predictions from 3 months ago were wrong. Mm. All the predictions of today, I don't know. The death rate obviously is less than we thought.
Mm. Well, thank God.
Yeah, praise the Lord. But that was, based on early information. But the death rate is still pretty high. This is still bad. It's still a higher death rate than the flu, and the flu is bad enough. Mm. And it's still very contagious. And still a lot of people get it, and they're like, I got this. Where did I get this from? And all of a sudden they're in the hospital.
Yeah.
So it's still a major problem.
So can you give a comment to the video that you produced a week ago? You did address the virus one last time before you put a lockdown on that, right?
Oh my. I had no idea what was about to happen. Now, no doubt most listeners have heard of an upcoming documentary called Plandemic. Their trailer went viral. I mean, millions of views. And share and share and share. And so the day before I released a video on this, about 10 people asked me. We're talking, work email, personal email, text on my phone, Biblical Genetics website, Biblical Genetics Facebook group, regular Facebook. All these people are asking me, I'm like, what is this? So I went and I watched this video. I'm like, this is awful. These people aren't telling the truth. And so it was late in the day. I had just worked a full day and I actually worked late and I went for a jog and I just eaten dinner and I'm typing up a response and, just typing up a response to this video, Plandemic Part 1. And I realized, why am I writing this? I should do a video response.
I have a YouTube channel.
And so I sat on my front porch as it was getting dark and I talked for 23 minutes and I only had to make 1 or 2 edits, which is kind of amazing. And I went inside and I edited it and I exported it and I loaded it up to YouTube and it was 12:30 when that thing finally got loaded. And I sat there for half an hour and I had 130 views pretty quickly. I was amazed. And it's 7:30 in the morning. So I went to bed about 1:30, sitting down for my work day now at 7:30 in the morning, and I had 3,000 views.
3,000. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Overnight in the 6 hours that I got sleep. So I'm bleary eyed saying, I needed more sleep last night.
Well, it's not even been 12 hours since it was released.
No, it's 6 hours. By the end of the day, 6 o'clock that evening, I had 43,000 views. And I had sucked up 4.9 thousand hours of people's eyeballs. And I couldn't believe it.
You got a taste of that writing the algorithm on YouTube high.
I did. I just, they were going viral and I just piggybacked along with it. I'm perfectly happy with that, except I stirred up the trolls. and I got a lot of insults, and I answered a lot of excoriating comments where I tried to answer politely, but I was being called all sorts of things.
I don't think you need to respond to the trolls.
I know that, but
They're just flesh-eating monsters without souls. They're not even human.
okay, but most of the people responding are people that I would like to be friends with if they weren't trapped in this system of thinking.
Sure.
And so my heart's going out, especially to my Christian brothers and sisters who are trapped. Because you watch something like that video presentation and it looks so good until you stop and you think through it and you realize, wait a minute, that sentence doesn't follow from that next sentence. Those ideas don't go together, and they just spun them together like they're one whole. And wait a second, I can fact check that statement right there. When I fact check that statement, that person's not telling the truth. And I was actually disappointed in my own performance here because I started getting aggressive about 3/4 of the way through. I literally told myself, Carter, calm down. Because like, I got these people now, bam, bam, bam. And I just slow down, man. And so I relaxed. I started pacing myself a little more. And some of the comments I got were like, you're arrogant. And that just sunk my heart because, I know I was struggling with that. And they pointed it out. I'm just like, oh, that's terrible. And so I'm going to try real hard next time to just chill. And I missed some opportunity. Now, I did do a little gospel-y thing at the end, but I missed an opportunity to read some Bible verses while I was doing this. And I'm kicking myself because had I planned better, and yet even though I'm thinking this is a disaster, I've still got 43,000 views. And even though a lot of people are commenting negatively, a lot of people commented positively.
Good.
And so that was my goal.
Do you think that the pandemic response in their comments were especially positive? Like they, the same people criticizing you were also praising them up and down?
Oh, yeah.
Or I was wondering is there like trolls to go around from different vantage points?
Yeah, but see, most of the people are just regular people. This is not trollish behavior. This is clannish behavior. And the number...
That's a very good way to describe it.
And honestly, I think the U.S. government has lost the information battle.
I think most of the governments have, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as the anti-vax debate, the U.S. government has lost. There's going to be resistance to any future vaccines that are put on or any mandates. Now, in New York State, they might have been able to slap down, no more religious exemptions, but that's New York. I don't think the rest of the country is going to go for it. And this whole pandemic thing, everyone's sick and tired of it. Everyone's like, I'm going outside. And I like those people who threw the park ranger in a lake in Texas last week. Yeah. I'm sorry, it is terrible, but I'm laughing at the same time because like, phooey, they push him in the water.
So I know that here in Georgia with the lockdown situation changing and now everything is open again, one of the things that was open before stores was the public parks, because if the gyms were closed, if the official organized sports were canceled, if the gyms at school were shut down because school is closed, they still wanted to help people get their basic exercise, recommending don't gather, keep your 6 feet away from each other, use your face masks, but by all means, use the state public parks. And guess what? More than a week and a half after those parks were supposed to be reopened, they still had the police line caution tape up, blocking the entrance of all those parks.
Yep, they slow walked that thing.
And if you happen to be in the neighborhood at that park in a public place and an officer of the law found you, there was a very good chance they were going to tell you you were not allowed there, leave, or they were going to not be very nice and give you a fee, give you a fine. So then you would be the party explaining to the police officer that he was doing something against the law. And actually, if he's not going to remove the yellow tape, you will. And then he would say,
but you don't want to be in that position as a citizen.
No.
And that's, it's actually back in February when Gary and I did our first coronavirus video for the Creation Talk. I made a joke, not really a joke, but I made a statement. I'm like, can you imagine if the U.S. government tried to lock down a major American city? As in, I could not imagine it in February. I mean, I was thinking, if they tried to lock down Atlanta, that shooting would start. That, okay, maybe Boston, but never Atlanta, not Birmingham. And yet everything got shut down anyway.
Incredible.
Amazing. The American people are amazingly patient.
Patient and surprisingly flexible.
Yeah.
I think that
Honestly, I think most
Western
Americans,
civilization was surprisingly flexible for a while.
most Americans have been really cool about this.
Yeah.
Even though it's been a disaster economically for a lot of people, most people have been, everybody chill, we're just going to get through this. I'm worried that if we get another one, no one's going to obey.
Right.
And I mean, the information battle. And see this coronavirus, this pandemic documentary is part of the information battle that's being lost. And that's part of what we're trying to do here on Equinox, sorry. I went through the old way of saying it.
I'll forgive you. I'll just like dub over your voice in post. Equinox.
But one of the things we're trying to do here is to stimulate intelligent debate and discussion and thought and dig, because as you stretch your mind, you start learning how to analyze and double check facts. And when you're really interested, but interested in such a way that you can think through an issue that helps you deal with all the misinformation that's being thrown at us. And it is shocking. I can't trust anything.
Yep.
I don't trust my government. I don't trust anything I hear on Facebook or YouTube.
Nope.
And I mean, I'm a scientist and I'm having issues with trust. Whoa, this is not good. I mean, this is a disaster for a civilization.
I remember in the last 15 years, most of my career has been in organizations where sources mattered a lot, attribution, knowing the fact of the matter. And over all these years, the content creators have had a real hard time making sure that they got useful, accurate information. It is rough nowadays. The internet has not really made this any better.
No. One of the rules of CMI for all the writers, in fact, speakers too, but for all the writers, you can't say something. You can't source something unless you have the source. You can't put a footnote, even type in the whole reference. John Brown, 1888, War Against the States or something like that. You can't even type the reference in unless you actually have it, because we don't want someone to get caught out trusting someone else's referencing when it wasn't true. And we don't want people playing fast and loose, throwing references in there even though they actually don't know if that's actually what it says. But on the internet, you can't do that. Things are just said. And so, okay, hey, audience, we're trying not to be grumpy here.
Oh, I don't feel we're grumpy. We're just honestly saying things that matter of fact and are very sobering.
Okay, sober. That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
But thank you for indulging us. Are you ready to move on?
I'm definitely ready to move on. Let's do something fun.
Awesome. Part 2 of Dr. Robert Carter.
Oh, that's right.
So are you ready to explain yourself again? I don't feel like we got a satisfying answer last time. You had explained marine biology, bioluminescent fish, your education, incredible background, very fun story. I've seen some docudrama films. This would actually kind of be fun. Knowing how personable you are in real life, I could totally see somebody playing your life. And it wouldn't be Barney Fife, it wouldn't
Can I
be
play
Don
my
Knotts.
life?
Yeah, if you could, it'd be performed pretty good.
All right.
There could be some more special effects in your film than there are in real life. Maybe crank up the brightness on the bioluminescent fish.
Oh,
yeah?
Laser-eyed fish. Yeah.
Yeah, can you give sound effects to the coral? Something, just a guttural? Or did they make music? Would there be musical sounding coral?
All the time I spent staring at corals under a microscope and watching their beautiful movements, I never thought of choreographing them.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be cool. I did see once a slow motion video of two corals next to each other, and corals of two different corals. They might not like each other.
Was this a slow motion or a time lapse where the movie was sped up?
Yeah, time lapse. And these two corals that were next to each other, and if they don't like each other, they'll send out what's called a sweeper tentacle. It's a really long tentacle with a lot of stingers on the end. And when you watch it, it looks like they're whacking each other. Smack, 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 smack. Over hours. You would never see it. You would never notice it. And they start dying back. Because they're literally killing each other. And in the coral world, there's this whole entire hierarchy of who can kill whom.
No way.
There's all this competition for space, because space on the reef is, precious.
It's almost like we're running at the speed of the Flash. It's like to the coral, we're speedsters.
Oh yeah, because they're on a 1,000-year time scale.
Yeah, so it's not that to them they're slow, but it's that we are fast, and what they see is their sword fight going on in real time.
Yeah, and once you realize that, as you're swimming around the reef, you can see that this coral is slowly overgrowing that other coral. or there's a dead line between these two animals because they're stinging each other every night.
Oh, it's war.
Yeah. And so two different corals of the same species probably will fight, but maybe not. They fight. They can't even move, but they fight anyway. But if a coral, like a branch, breaks off and roots on the ground, on the bottom, it's not on the dirt, but underwater on the bottom, and starts growing again, if it runs into the original colony, they just merge back into one colony. These are really weird animals.
That is incredible. So you're not going to talk about marine biology anymore?
No, I guess not.
We have a lot of that.
Yeah, let's do genetics.
Oh, speaking of which, there's going to be links in the show notes. If you need to get the last episode, it'll be right there. And also, we're going to have a link to Rob's video about the pandemic in the show notes.
Oh, good.
For your convenience.
Thank you.
So explain where you began to transition to genetics, human genetics, and what that was like. What were your impressions of that career change?
Well, it was a really, really neat opportunity that I had.
How many years did you already have behind you in marine biology?
8 or 9.
Okay.
And 4 or 5 of that was in a genetics lab.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was I got done with my doctorate and moved back up to Atlanta. And I was going to work at the Georgia Aquarium. And they hadn't built it yet, or they're just building it then. But I had been writing the future director of the aquarium, who was in Hawaii at the time, every 6 months. And I said, I'm going to write you every 6 months so I stay on your radar, because when that thing's built, I'm moving to Atlanta and I'm going to come work at the aquarium. And when I got to Atlanta, I looked at the traffic and I said, I don't want to do that. So I was working as a handyman with a friend of mine, and I found out about the Gene Project that the Institute for Creation Research was running. Before that, they had run the RATE Project, Radioisotopes and Age of the Earth. And so to follow up that, they're going to do genetics. They call it the Gene Project. And I wrote them a letter, and I got invited to go out to California. They paid for my plane fare, paid for a week for me in a hotel, and I sat through a meeting, and I got hired.
Awesome.
I mean, and by the end of the first day, Dr. John Sanford said, Rob, you need a job? What do you want me to do? And so I started writing computer programs and analyzing data. Similar to what I was already doing before. But my friend in Atlanta, 2 doors down the road, old friend, he's actually the head of, I shouldn't say that. He works at Georgia Tech, let's say. Self-trained computer whiz. And he says, you need to learn how to program. I said, yes, I do. So he taught me how to program in Perl, which today is a dinosaur, but back then it was like the thing.
I knew you knew a thing or two about coding, but I didn't realize you knew Perl. I hear other podcasters that are developers talk about Perl.
I love Perl. I still program it. I've taken some C classes and I'm taking some Python classes, but I've never needed to use them because I can do everything already that I know how to do. And so I've been writing computer programs now since 2005 and analyzing data. And the first data set that I analyzed was human mitochondrial data. Now, listener, there's a little piece of DNA that you only get from your mother. It's called the mitochondrial DNA. It's about 16,000 letters long. It's actually 1,569 letters long. Okay, it's about 16,000 letters long. It's really tiny. That's 1.6 KB. That's smaller than any photograph you'll ever take on your phone. That's how big the file is. And so at the time, I spent a long time, and I downloaded about 1,400 of them from a government database. And I went through them and I got rid of all the bad ones. And all the bad ones are in the FBI database.
Why is that? That's odd that you would mention that.
It was shocking. The data that the federal government had collected was garbage. It had all these errors in it. And because they did it early and did it fast, and it wasn't, peer reviewed necessarily. And I ended up rejecting all of that data. And in the end, I got 800 samples. And that is amazing. For back then, this is, 2007, 8 now. I had 800 something samples. And I put them all together. And I made a family tree of all the ladies in the world. And then we calculated where Eve was.
Interesting.
No, but we didn't just
say Eve. We're talking about the woman number one.
Woman number one. We didn't just put our finger on the tree, so that's where she is. No, we recreated her genes. So you resurrected Eve, or you have her DNA. No, theoretically, we recreated it. Okay. We know what the sequence of the first woman was. We know what God created.
That's huge.
Yeah, fun.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, that sure is.
But, it's not going to be an episode all about genes. Tell me a little bit more about what you were doing after that project.
Well, that was my bridge into, the creation world that I had not been officially working on until, a couple of years before that. And pretty soon I learned about CMI, Creation Ministries. I was literally on the web one day and, just looking up science stuff and creation stuff. Just having
Around
fun.
What year?
This would be about 2007-ish.
Okay.
And I came across this group I'd never heard of before. but I recognized all the faces and the names. Turns out they had a new name and they were starting up a U.S. office in Atlanta. And I was like, what? So I sent him an email. And, well, no, they didn't have an office in Atlanta. They had a P.O. box in Atlanta. And the email went to Australia.
Oh.
And 2 nights later at 9 o'clock at night, which is 8 o'clock in the morning for them, I got a call from Carl Wieland. And he basically said, I like what you said. PhDs don't grow on trees. Let's talk. I ended up being the first person CMI hired from outside CMI for their U.S. office. They brought over Larry from the South African office because his visa had expired. So he came back to the States with his family. And CMI started in Larry's basement. And half of his garage was our warehouse. And then we hired a secretary, Mary Lee, who just retired this year. And we've expanded. Now we own this big building. We've got like 20 employees here. And we brought other people over from Australia. It's all these horrible accents that aren't... Sorry. I'm sorry.
It does feel sometimes like we're on the deck of one of the Enterprise, that has like a very multicultural atmosphere with more accents than we have any business with.
Yeah, but where's the person with the blue face? We don't have that one yet.
we need to find somebody. Can you wear this mask or this face paint for us? So when you began with CMI, were you working on research and public speaking, writing books? What did you do? What was the idea?
I was still working for ICR part-time when I started working at CMI part-time. So I had a full-time job, theoretically. I was doing my research at ICR, but CMI, I was preparing to give creation talks at churches. And I worked my tail off without pay at first, for a couple of months. I worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And then they brought me to Australia for speaker training. And they had me stand up in front of all of these people with PhDs that I had known and read their material for years. It was the most intimidating audience I'd ever had. And they didn't look at me.
So they were reviewing.
They were writing notes the whole time. And I need reaction from my audience. I feed off my audience.
So they were critiquing you, or were they trying to learn from you?
Okay.
They were gonna school you.
David Ketchpool, one of the most gentlest persons I've ever met. Lovely man. What a wonderful man. I've never heard him say anything bad about anybody. You know what his first words to me were after I was done?
What?
He said, Rob, I'm quoting now, Rob, that's the worst creation talk I've ever heard in my life.
Why?
Because it was terrible.
Okay, but were you not getting any training as of yet back in the U.S.?
Not yet.
Okay.
And
it was your first.
I thought I knew what I was doing because I'm a nerd. I like science. I like the Bible. I've been reading this creation stuff for 20 years. I was like, I got this. And I put together what I thought was a great talk. And between the 15 people in the room, they're like, you said that wrong. If you say that, you open yourself up to all these other, you don't even know how to understand that argument. You put this slide up. You don't even know what the slide is for. What are you doing? And they schooled me. And it was one of the best things that ever happened. Because I tell you what, it's better to be critiqued harshly by your friends than to be destroyed by your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, at CMI, if you're a speaker, you need a thick skin because we critique each other. Not meanly, but we do it to sharpen and hone and tweak and get better. And we do. And I got better. And now I get to wear all sorts of different hats. And
how did you wrap up things with ICR? Were you doing them for a few more years to come?
Yeah, one day the boss comes up to me and says, hey, Rob, you need to go full time. I said, I don't want to go full time because you want benefits? Oh, now we're talking.
Yeah, there you go.
And so, yeah, it was a couple years in, and when I actually became an official full-time member of the staff. And yet I still get to do research.
Yeah.
I'm one of the only ones who, part of my deal is I get to study and I get to analyze data and I get to produce new ideas. Most of the other speakers and staff members are reading science articles and writing articles about it and things like that. But I actually get to do, scratch one-off research from the beginning.
So how do you like to work these days? Do you like the presentations on the road on the weekends plus research on the weekdays? What does work-life balance look like for you?
For me, I mean, I am. If I was in school today, I'm certain they would diagnose me as being ADD and they put me on Ritalin. I have no doubt about it. It would ruin me. But I have a perfect job because there's some days I'm sitting in an office. And there's some days I'm walking an airport. There's some days I'm in front of 500 people. And there's some days I'm in a corner just chilling and typing up an article. And that back and forth, constantly changing workflow is perfect for me. I would have a hard time. In fact, this whole coronavirus thing, I've been sitting in a chair in my living room for 2 months now.
And you're still alive.
I'm still alive, but after a couple of weeks of that, I was like, I can't do this anymore.
You need some Ritalin stat.
Sorry. Anyway, I've got this dream job for me because I can write on any topic I want. So I get to write on physics and biology and marine biology and corals and Bible and genetics and genealogy and history. And if I just scroll down the list of articles that I wrote, which is on my bio on creation.com, I've got them categorized into all these different categories because I like different things and I like doing different things. And one of my favorite things to do actually is to co-author articles with other people. I work faster with other people and my ideas gel quicker. And so, just recently I did a very long article in the Shroud of Turin and a couple of articles on the genetic history of the Israelites according to the scriptures. And I've talked about dinosaurs and the history of Egypt.
If you could pursue another scientific venture and explore it to the nth degree, just like, Rob, here's a blank check, pursue this.
Wow.
What would that project be?
Probably genetics.
Okay.
Yeah.
But where would you go further in genetics?
I would get DNA sequencing to the point where it's so accurate we can actually use it to measure a mutation rate. Because one of the biggest frustrations for me right now, all these $1 million programs, millions of dollars programs, and the data quality isn't high enough. There is an error rate to DNA sequencing, and there's an error rate in humanity because of mutations. They're about the same. So if I look at your DNA versus my DNA, I don't know how long we've been separated because there's error in the data from the sequencing. I don't know what's an error and what's a mutation. Hugest frustration. So I just nerded out there. You asked me where I'd go. Actually, I would stay where I am, but drill down into that one specific area that we really want answered. Because then we can answer questions like, how long has humanity been around? How many mutations really are there per generation? How long would that take to accumulate? Why are these variants in Africa and these variants in Iceland? Those kind of questions we can't answer yet because we don't have the good enough data for it yet.
But do you think that we're going to be able to get to that point? Do you think that we're going to have that technology in the not too distant future?
Actually, I've been really disappointed because now I realize that we don't have one human genome. Our DNA mutates over our lifetimes, and each cell is different than the cell next door.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that hadn't accounted for that.
And some cells reproduce faster than others, so you can get entire clones like taking over as your cells reproduce. Your DNA can actually shift and change, and mutations in your body can ebb and flow. So there is no human genome. There's variable DNA and ARG. And so we might not ever get back to Adam and Eve, but I want to know if we can. But if I had to focus on one thing, I would go crazy. So I'm going to have to look at, I just wrote an article with Matthew Cherhati on Jacob's breeding experiment. The sheep and goats that Jacob and Laban were arguing about, that's a very interesting genetic puzzle. Yeah,
because he's getting black spots and streaks.
Yeah, and so we looked at the genetics of the animals and said, okay, we can now explain what happened in this story, which is fun. I don't think anyone's ever actually done it like that. But I also love talking, of course, about technology in the cell. And if I wasn't, thinking about physics, in fact, you know what we're going to do on the next episode? Mm-hmm. I've decided. We're going to take physics and coral and biology, marine biology, and the skeletons of corals and chemistry too. And we're going to put it all together. And let's talk about the so-called banding in Paleozoic corals. Sounds kind of weird, but it's really amazing. This idea, it brings together all these things like the moon slowing the Earth down. And what would it have looked like if the Earth is, 300 million years ago in the middle of the Paleozoic? Well, the calculation says day length would have been about 22 hours instead of 24 hours. Whoa, wait a minute. So some physics there. We're also going to talk about the biochemistry of the animal. And if we can actually tell when those corals were alive what the length of day was.
So, yeah, you're making a very good point that you do like the variety within the field.
Yeah.
So for a ministry like CMI, you're an educational powerhouse. And you're collaborative, you're working with the guys with the articles, you are shaking things up with all these different topics. So what is the point of a organization like CMIs? Why are you writing these articles? Why are you giving these presentations? What does it all mean? Why does it matter? Why does an organization go out of their way to do this?
For a lot of people, having answers to basic questions in science is really important for what they believe. That's true, for lots of different people, whether you're not a Christian or not. But for Christians specifically, because I'm a Christian and I've got a heart for other Christians who are wrestling with ideas, specifically younger Christians like teenagers who are being bombarded with things that they can't answer. And one of the reasons they can't answer it because, well, they might be 15 and the person hitting them upside the head with some new information might be, 60. And he's had a lot more years to think about these things than that this new person who's just opening up their mind to some weird ideas. And so for me, I like to think that I exist because there's one person out there who needs to hear a reasonable defense of the faith, and I might be able to give it to him.
Can I introduce you to something I've been working on for a number of years then?
Yeah.
It kind of relates to this subject.
Yeah.
So years ago, there was someone who had like words of wisdom to give young people.
Okay.
That would say this to the young people that he ran into at church. Everything spoken must be true, but not everything true must be spoken. And he would kind of like give
I have that problem. I tend to say everything. I can't stop not saying it. It's okay.
So the thing was, this was something that he learned while he was a younger adult. And it was a rule of thumb that he had learned had helped him so much that he stuck by it. And it kind of changed his outlook on life and how he viewed philosophical decisions and how he related to even his immediate family.
All right.
Now, you would think that as a whole, with a virtuous proverb statement like that, everything spoken must be true, but not everything true must be spoken, that he began to view what people were saying to him through that lens. And you'd think that it would be good. Well, as it turned out, it kind of backfired because someone close to him kind of was lying to him. But he was so accustomed to this notion that everything spoken must be true that he was filtering what someone was telling him with the assumption this must be true because the truth is what must be spoken. So inadvertently, he made himself a little bit gullible. So here's my point.
Okay.
I think that sometimes when the older generation has come up with certain scientific ideas, they got this ideal and they think that this is what is true. We got this and we can teach this in school. Or like in the example of this person who has this notion of everything spoken must be true, but not everything true must be spoken. There's a hole in that virtue statement. There's a little bit of a way in which it isn't applicable to all situations. He's set himself up for a little failure. So the younger generation comes along and might witness his mistake and say, well, I'm not going to live by that. I'm going to change everything that I'm about.
Yep.
So I call this the plateau effect.
Okay, explain.
So it's the idea that somebody is trying to solve a problem for his generation. It is a problem he personally faces. He thinks that this is going to correct something about philosophy or science or religion, and he taps it. He has a burst of insight. He's got it. This is the answer to what my people need to hear. So then he develops his whole school of thought around that principle. And then he preaches on it. He writes books about it. He does research on it. He discusses it with others on podcasts, and it becomes his mantra. It works, but the problem with the plateau effect is that that's where you're roosting. You sit on your laurels, and you think your answer is the answer to far more problems than it actually solves. So you think that you've got it all made because you're looking at this one plateau on the side of a mountain, and you're content to stay there, and you just keep teaching people this one principle and think it answers a whole lot more than it actually answers. Meanwhile, the next generation, the younger generation's coming up behind you and realize, oh, this is a very interesting plateau, but they see its foibles and flaws. And so then it's much easier for the next generation to come along and say, yeah, I'm not buying it. because that doesn't answer some of the questions I have. And I'm looking at this other side of the mountain over there, and I want to see what that's all about.
You know where my brain jumped when you're talking here? My earliest years in the 1970s that I remember. We had stagflation. I wasn't young enough to remember the Vietnam War, but I remember the after effects of it anyway. The boat people that came and tried to flee that country after we left. We had the Red Scare, which morphed into the Cold War. We had peak oil and the oil embargo. We had all, the coming ice age everyone was worried about. But that brought in Ronald Reagan. So my high school years was not Jimmy Carter anymore, Gerald Ford. Before that, it was Ronald Reagan. It was Go America. We can do this, rah, rah, rah. But that morphed into Iran-Contra and ballooning budgets. And even though we had Star Wars and we're like, yeah, we're going to nuke the Russians, blah, 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 blah. It was just a pipe dream. Economically, it was impossible. And then the Soviet Union fell apart, and we get, after Bush, we get Bill Clinton. And just the psyche of the country is flipping up and down and back and forth and left and right. And what you figure out in one generation or decade has nothing to do with what's going to be like a couple years later. And so our yesterday self is planning for yesterday constantly.
Meanwhile, the next generation is coming along and saying, well, what you're dealing with is not the problems I have.
Yeah.
And then they develop their own plateau. They set up base camp. They do their thing. They create their platform. Here's their answer to all the problems.
Yeah. So what's this generation, the high school, elementary school generation going to be like when they live through this silly coronavirus problem?
Oh my.
How's that affecting them? I mean, I couldn't imagine, that whole 1960s, early 70s thing. Those young people were rebelling against the thought of imminent death. Because it was the bomb scare, and we're going to be nuked, and the hippies came out of that.
So it was almost like their mind was already living in a future where it was post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, pretty much.
We might as well just feel good.
Yeah, but if we just love each other, all the world's problems will be solved. So what's going to be the psyche of this current generation? I'm hoping they're going to be the can-do generation. Mm-hmm. We can fix the problems. We're not scared of anything, sort of thing. I hope so, but I don't know.
So that's the plateau effect. It's this idea, like you were saying, you've got the 60-year-old who's got his influential ideas on the 15-year-old coming up. And how do we avoid that? That is a great place for scientists to work. And science can't rest on its...
Science communicators.
We can't rest on our laurels.
No, we cannot.
And that is what pretty much happens to the philosophers, the thinkers, the pundits, the scientists that come along and say, I've got it all figured out based on a book published in the 19th century. Here you go, guys. And the science has moved on, but we're still stuck on that plateau that is over 100 years old that is holding us way back because there's so much more of the mountain to climb ahead, and we have so much more to learn.
So how do we communicate this to people who want to know stuff and want to be faithful Christians at the same time? That's my challenge. And that's my best part of my job, is encouraging people that even if we don't have all the answers, we know where the answers lie. Here's the direction we need to go. We don't have to run away or drop our faith just because, Richard Dawkins or, someone with Sam Harris, or I'm just trying to think of random names here. Mm-hmm. Someone who's got a really good personality and a blistering intellect, and they can tie us in knots intellectually. Well, we don't have to follow that person necessarily. We can answer those things. And that's the coolest thing. I love being able to do that. And the fact that I'm interested in so many different subjects helps me a lot. So like one of my absolute favorite things to do, all the writing and interacting with people and all the traveling, is not even speaking in churches. It's when I'm done, very often we'll have an impromptu question and answer session. And the audience can ask me anything they want. And that's my absolute favorite thing, because it's random topics, random questions. I never know what's coming. And I get to show them that, even if I'm not an expert and I don't exactly necessarily know the answer, I know where to go and I point them in a direction. But usually I know the answer because I've been doing this so long, and it's just fun. I like getting challenged like that and getting stumped sometimes. Every once in a while, I was like, I have no idea what that answer is. I haven't even heard that phrase before. That's cool. That's fine. Because next time, I heard that last time. I still don't know what it is. I still have more to learn.
You know what I think that would be great? We already have a wonderful ministry, or two or three, that are helping people with these science topics. It feels like a real way to give this a boost. We need to be able to educate the teachers and the ministers and the preachers, the pastors.
Yes.
Those that are routinely in the churches, to address these issues.
Yes.
So something else that I wanted to touch upon is we focus so much on the science and the creation aspects, but this is just one little piece of the pie for a Christian paradigm, the Christian faith belief. It is the Bible. It is always the Bible, but creation is not what the entire Bible is about. So a lot of people would refer to it as a Christian worldview. And you had mentioned that you're not very fond of that term.
I don't like the word worldview.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like Christianese. It's a word Christians say.
Like theology, apologetics.
Those are good words.
Okay, those are okay.
Yeah, but
See, I personally am not a fan of those.
Really?
Yeah, like worldview to me feels a little bit more approachable, but...
Yeah, but no one uses that word.
No one does.
And you have a worldview. That's the way you interpret everything you... What?
There was a movie that came out a couple of years ago when I was reviewing movies called Vantage Point.
Okay.
And it's an action film where there is an assassination attempt, and then it plays through the assassination attempt scene from one person's vantage point. And then at the end of that scene unfolding, it zooms in on somebody else who was there, and then we rewind the clock and see the whole scene over again from this other person's vantage point.
Cool.
Vantage point is a term, kind of like worldview. It kind of means something, but it also doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, but vantage point is obvious. Maybe not to everyone. It's a phrase I would use. I wouldn't have any problem with it. But
Okay.
the word worldview is it's not my vocabulary. It's weird because I work for a worldview ministry. And we have lots of articles on them, and that word pops up in a lot of people's writings, but never in mine. So putting the word worldview aside, we all do approach the world in different ways. And the way the Christian is supposed to think, there's a specific mindset we're supposed to have. And it's hard to achieve because we're sinful, we get angry, we get lazy, we can be really ignorant of a lot of topics sometimes. And honestly, my age right now, I should know a lot more about the Bible than I do. There's certain parts of the Bible I have no clue. You ask me about like Revelation or end times theology, I'll tell you what I am, but I haven't studied it in decades.
At least you're honest.
Oh.
Not everybody can be so can admit that they don't know something.
I've taken classes through church, seminary classes, New Testament, Old Testament classes, 4 of them. And when we got to Psalms, I almost died. I had no idea there were so many details in the Psalms, so many really cool things, but I'm like, I just don't understand this. And I was that way in high school too with English classes. They'd be talking about analyzing some poem. And I'm like, what are you talking? It was like total gibberish. So there are places in the Bible I don't know, but I try real hard to take a general biblical approach to most areas of life. And that's what I'm trying to encourage Christians to do while I'm on a speaking circuit in all my writings. We have this thing called the Bible. Let's believe it and let's apply it.
Awesome. Well, you think that's about, do you want to wrap up there? I feel like we're hanging.
So there's the life of Rob.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad. This is a good bookend.
All this time talking about me, which was actually very uncomfortable. I don't want to talk about me. I like to talk about things that I like to talk about, but not me personally necessarily. So audience, thank you for bearing with us.
Well, I thought this is what podcasts were all about, was, just talking about yourself, right?
And I really enjoy...
I'm kidding.
Well, I do, enjoy listening to the stories behind the people that I listen to.
Yeah.
There's a couple podcasters, I know nothing about them, and I love their shows, but who is this person?
That would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
Like, my favorite shows are where I really feel like I got to know something about the hosts.
Yeah, and so, when we're setting up Equinox and we're talking about what we're going to do, this is part of the feel we want to do. We wanted to make it personal.
Mm-hmm.
Geeky, nerdy, fun, whimsical, and sometimes personal.
Yeah.
You just lay it bare. So there we go.
So thank you so much for joining us on this episode. If you want to dig deeper into this episode's topics, learn anything else about Rob or the things that he has written, you can find links to stuff that we have discussed in the show notes on our website. Hop over to nightowl.fm/equinox/12. And if it's more handy for you, the show notes are also with this episode in your podcast player. If you want us to discuss a science topic that you have in mind, please tweet to @podcastequinox and we'll get your idea in the queue. Or if you want to reach out to Rob and see his science videos, go to Biblical Genetics on Facebook and YouTube, where you can watch his latest and join his discussions. If you want to catch up with me, I'm JCS Darnell on Twitter. Until next time, goodbye, Rob.
Goodbye, Joe.
And thank you, dear listener, for listening to Equinox. So something I was going to ask you, Rob, that we never got around the show.
Oh, we're not done yet.
Well, we're done technically, but
Okay.
earlier today I asked you in a text message, did you know anything about supermoons?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it was my wife and I had been like noticing some odd behavior. Last night we went to bed before midnight, and I felt like I went to sleep pretty fast. And it was comfortable, like I had a hot tea, I was relaxed. I felt like I was both in a deep sleep and not asleep at all. And then after like laying there completely motionless for a long time, I like, and I wake up and I just kind of like know that my wife is still awake. And I reach over and I touch the phone, and it's been an hour. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "Are you still awake?" And she goes, "Yes." Just like that. And I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" And she says, "I don't know." She gets up. She's like, "I'm not tired at all." And she goes to the restroom, and she looks out the bathroom. She goes to the bathroom. She looks out the window. She goes, "Oh, it's a full moon outside. It's really bright."
You are turning into lunatics.
That is that loon
That's
in
right.
Luna.
That's where it comes from. Moonlight. You don't go get moonlight, you'll turn into a lunatic.
So what is this? So then she looks it up and she says, it's actually like the height of the last supermoon of the year.
Yeah.
What is a supermoon?
Well, it's actually not really that big a deal.
Oh, okay.
And I get very frustrated with today all the, it's this kind of a supermoon and there's a blood moon, something harvest, blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, come on, man. Weird stellar, strange and rare stellar occurrences happen all the time. Oh, it's the alignment of the planets. No, it's the alignment of this planet and that planet. No, it's the alignment of this planet and the moon. No, this planet and that constellation. No, it's... And so you can always, trump up something weird like that. And lately, supermoons have become a very popular topic. It's just weird. What it is the moon's orbit is not circular. Not perfectly circular. It's a little bit elliptical. So there's sometimes the moon is closer and sometimes it's farther away. Happens once a month.
Yeah.
Well, that is not timed exactly to the month. So sometimes a full moon happens when the moon is furthest away. Sometimes it happens on the sides, and sometimes it happens when it's as close as it can be. It's a thing called perigee. That just means the moon is as close as it's going to get. And when a full moon happens at perigee, we call it a supermoon. It's been happening for thousands of years. It's cool. I mean, the moon is theoretically bigger. You can't tell with your eyeball.
So is it true that the moon can actually mess with like your circadian rhythm or your internal clock or mess with your sleep pattern or any of that?
But you know what? We were created in a world with no streetlights.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were made to have a lunar cycle. We were built, pre-programmed to a world where it would get really, really dark some nights and almost bright enough to read other nights.
Interesting.
I had a really awesome trip. It was a month-long trip to the Bahamas, and we're on a remote island. And to get to the place where my bed was, I had to ride a bike about a mile down a dirt gravelly sort of road. And I didn't have a light. And I just been riding back and forth that month, but I didn't realize the moon had been out. And the night where it was kind of late and I had to go to my place, the moon had set.
Man, wow.
I couldn't see.
Man.
The road, it was pitch black.
Yeah.
Starlight was enough where I could walk, but I couldn't ride my bike. But when the moon was out, I could ride my bike fine. I could avoid every pothole, every rock. It was no problem at all.
Wow.
So yeah, Luna is important to humanity. And we are in tune to it, but we kind of forget the moon's out there. Now,
well, we should talk about the moon next time then. Because, this is equinox. We talked about planet Earth for Earth Day.
This is true. And I already kind of earlier on gave a little spoiler for the subject I would like to talk about, which is about the moon and the way the moon slows the Earth down.
Yeah.
And what happens to biology. Okay, that's a perfect segue.
Cool.
All right. Now, I don't know what was happening. I don't think the moon's gravity affects us like that. Light outside might affect us, but we have so much lights in our house now. I think we have pretty much decoupled ourselves from the lunar signal, whatever it might have been.